Hello everybody. What if I told you that back in the early 2000s, Subaru made a car with a supercharged 4-cylinder engine that went to over 8,000 RPM, had 4-wheel drive and a manual gearbox? Your first reaction would probably be, what's that car, why have I never heard of it, and where can I get one? That is until I show you said car. And now you've clapped eyes on it, you've probably gone, ah yes, that's why I haven't heard of it, and that's why I don't particularly want one, thank you very much. But before you close that eBay window, allow me to give you this car's party piece. It has a mini disc player. Oh yes. Welcome to the weird and wonderful thing that is the Subaru Pleo RS Limited 2. This is the second of 2 K cars that I am reviewing today. In case you weren't aware, K is the designation for the smallest category of cars on sale in Japan. It features a number of weight, size and power restrictions, so all of the cars that fit in that category must be shorter than 3.3 meters, narrower than 1.4, have an engine displacing no more than 660cc and make no more than 64 horsepower. It was born of a desire to incentivize Japanese car makers into building stuff that people could afford after the war. However, as time progressed and Japan became a little bit more affluent, the rules changed and the cars got quite a bit nicer. This reached a peak in the 1990s when wild and wacky stuff began to hit the market. Things like the AutoZam AZ1, the Suzuki Cappuccino, which is the other car that I drove and probably one of the best known of the Ks. Not all that many K cars were ever sold outside of their home market, chiefly because they didn't make an awful lot of sense. They weren't actually that affordable once you paid to ship them halfway around the world, and they fit a set of rules that didn't really apply anywhere else. One of the few international K car success stories, at least here in Britain, was the Suzuki Wagon R, which has very much a cult following. And if that's your special kind of sauce, this is probably also the sort of thing that's going to appeal. So it's built in very much the same way as the Wagon R. Take your K car dimensions and essentially build the biggest thing you can that fit into that particular box. It was introduced in 1998 and went on until 2010. All of them were powered by a flavour of 660cc 4-cylinder engine, available in naturally aspirated or supercharged guise, with 2 different power outputs available for the supercharged ones. There was this full-fat 64 horsepower car, or what's called the mild-charged 60 horsepower. The idea of that engine was to produce a sort of torque and power delivery more akin to a 1-litre naturally aspirated lump. This one was the crazy banzai out there one for real performance junkies. Probably. Not all of the Pleo family actually looks like this. Some of them look a little bit more humdrum, but one of my favourites is the Pleo Nesta, which looks kind of like someone drew a London taxi from memory. Oddball thing. If you said it was a Chinese knockoff of something else, I would believe you. This being a Japanese car, there were of course a million different variants, and annoyingly, the internet hasn't been particularly forthcoming on what each of them actually gave you. This is the RS Limited 2. The RS was a sort of sportier version of the car, and the Limited was released to celebrate the 40th anniversary of Subaru's all-wheel drive system. The 2 was simply a facelifted version of that car. So yeah, this really is a supercharged manual car with 4-wheel drive that's about the size of a shoebox. From the outside, with its aggressive bumpers, the wing on the back, the sporty looking wheels, you'd think it would be a pretty fun car. So is it? Well, sort of, in its own very special, weird, wacky and wonderful way. This car, which has been brought to me by its very kind owner Brad, a real Japanese car fanatic who's had a lot of cars on the channel, is unmodified. So it still makes the original 64 horsepower and 73 pound-feet. It's about 103 newton-meters of torque. It really does need revs to get the best from it, but even so, it's not really what you would call brisk. The gearshift, as it happens, is not particularly pleasant. very, very sloppy, very long throw, about as far from the old cappuccino as you can get. Right, this car's not fast, I promise you that. Allow me to prove it. That's 30 kilometers an hour into second, 50 Ks into third, at 70 Ks, at 80, that's 50 mile an hour, at 90, and that is the national speed limit. So it will get there. Handling is curious. The steering is geared much slower than you might expect. That being said, it will turn in, but if you're expecting Impreza-like grip from this thing, you would be wrong. The good news though is that because it's dinky, you can afford to wash a little bit wide in the odd corner. Provided you're well aware of the car's ability and you know the road, you can use a lot of it. Heel and toe is achievable, though the pedals are a little bit further apart than I would like. Rev matching, very easy. See? The tyres do not have masses of grip, and under braking I can hear them chirping away a lot sooner than I might expect. They are actually fairly new Pirellis, they're just not very big. 165 wide. Come on, old girl. I do have a sneaking suspicion, particularly on a 20-degree day here in Britain, the all-wheel drive system isn't particularly necessary. Makes a decent noise though, and I will say some other things for the car. It has a lot of room in it. Bear in mind, I've just gotten out of the Cappuccino, which is built to the same regulations as this, and is a two-seater, but is very cramped. This is a full four-seater, and you really can get 4 adults in it. They won't be especially comfortable, but even your tallest friends can probably just about fit in here, though maybe not all 4 of the tallest at the same time. I have acres of headroom. I mean, seriously, there's loads of it, more so than I think you could ever realistically need. The only conclusion I can draw from this is that one of their test drivers was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and I have no doubt whatsoever that now the majority of my young audience is currently going, who? I also really like the fact that the interior does feel like someone's put just a tiny bit of effort into making it feel a little bit nicer. These swathes of blue on the doors and on the steering wheel do lift it. The seats also are pretty decent. They're very, very narrow. You sit on them rather than in them, but they do a better job than I expected. And frankly, the car gives up long before they do. It is that steering which is really throwing me because it's so slow to turn in, but maybe that's for the best, because with a car of this sort of dimensions, narrow, tall, you don't want to upset it on the entry into a bend. Boot space, as you might imagine, isn't exactly brilliant. Fuel economy is also only okay. We don't have an exact MPG figure, but I think the tank is rather small. This was filled up this morning, hasn't driven all that far, and has now only got about a quarter left. Much like the Cappuccino, it's also really short geared, so very often you find yourself pulling away in second and the car does not protest at all. It even has air conditioning, which works and is icy cold. It's also got the largest wind deflectors I have ever seen fitted to a car. The ride is far from atrocious, though I would be lying if I said it was the pinnacle of luxury. Anything really that's trying to be sporty and has a very short wheelbase generally struggles. Over the odd pothole and lump in the road, it can be a touch crashy. Though the gear shift is far from that you'll find in an Impreza, which often is quite a delight, it does the job. The only real issue is, because the car is so narrow, and the gear lever is right down here next to your passenger's knee and thigh, it is something of a lawsuit waiting to happen. Do not take one of these on a first date. Up a hill, if you don't want to use all the revs, it can struggle just a little bit, and it's one of those cars that makes 45 feel like 70. On occasion, that's a very good thing. On others, it's not good at all. It does, though, do the one thing that a K car always should. It puts a smile on your face. Because these are cars that in Britain you simply don't need, and if you were being at all logical, you wouldn't buy, they are the sort of thing that appeal only to the person that wants something because it's different. And this definitely is that. In fact, we believe this is likely to be the only one of its breed here in Britain. There's a chance there are other Pleos, in fact it's almost certain people will import just about anything, but as RS Limited 2s go, there can't be many of those. If you do also happen to own one of these, please email me and I'll put you in touch with Brad, this car's owner, and you can organise the smallest yet most complete car club in Britain. Fortunately, Brad hasn't really needed to source anything for this car, but he says parts availability seems to be generally quite good. You may also be expecting one of the reasons people haven't bought these by their thousands is that they are simply overpriced. Working out an exact value for this, being the only one, is nearly impossible, but we reckon it's worth around about 6,000 quid. And that does seem rather good value. City cars do tend to be quite desirable things because they are quite practical, quite useful for those who need them. Japanese cars at the moment, particularly of the classic variety, are also experiencing unprecedented appreciation. So for anything out there to command such a low price without anything being particularly obviously wrong with it is rather unusual. And let's be honest here, if this car could be summed up in one word, unusual is probably pretty accurate. All I think really that remains for me to say is thank you to Brad for bringing his car out. If you happen to be a font of knowledge on these rather unusual little cars, please pop into the comment section down below and share with the class that you know. For the rest of you, I want to say simply thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button, comment down below as well, and naturally subscribe if you haven't already. I shall see you for the next one. Bye bye.